Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, my guest is Anne Marie Anderson. She is a three-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, keynote speaker, and author of a book called Cultivating Audacity. She walked through the ESPN doors fresh out of college and embarked on this amazing career, 35 years and counting in sports broadcasting, and she's learned so much about life and leadership and how to take bold moves in your life and in your career. And that's what we talk about today. We talk about how do you understand the difference between worthwhile risks and reckless risks, and how do you build the self-confidence to make a change in your life, and how do you take action instead of just waiting. And it is just such a fun interview, and I know that you are going to learn so much from her, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So hang tight, and I will be right back with Anne Marie. All right, I am back with the beautiful and lovely Anne Marie Anderson, and I'm so glad you are here today.
So good to chat with you, Kerry.
All right. So you have had an interesting career in the male dominated world of sports broadcasting. I want to know a little bit about this, right? Because it is always great to see women on the fields of NFL games. And of course, it hasn't always been that way. And you really kind of pioneered this in your career. So can you share a little bit about your journey?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I do work with a bunch of badass women. So there's a lot of us who were trying to break down the door as much as possible. I started at ESPN 35 years ago in a 6-month job, a temporary job, just right out of college. I was 21 years old. And I learned pretty quickly that you needed to compete. Now, I'm a former collegiate athlete, so competition came easily to me. That's one of the things I love about athletics is that it prepares you for the corporate world. And I competed every day, ended up turning my 6-month job into a 35-year career. And throughout those 35 years, I kept changing what my role was. I loved producing at first, and I worked my way up to a producer and then decided I wanted to be on camera, made it into sideline reporting, most for college football, and then decided I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer, which was a space that women hadn't really conquered yet. So along with a few other women, we kind of cracked that door open, and now it's been 20 plus years of play-by-play of several different sports, and I love work every day.
And so tell us a little bit more, like, what does your day look like now? What are you doing after 35 years of being in the sports broadcasting world?
I've got a TV part of my life, a speaking part of my life, an author part of my life, and I'm the mother of 3 kids too. So busy always. But the television part of my life, I am a play-by-play announcer. I've called 96 live events a year. I'm trying to dial that back, bringing in some of my other work. And I work with a variety of partners. I've called men's and women's college basketball, college volleyball, professional basketball for women, soccer, softball. I just say yes to everything. That's TV, Kerry. Is when they say, "Can you do this?" Of course I can. Whatever it is.
I love that. And so, over your 35-year career, what have you learned about yourself? What has been like the most aha moments that you've had?
The most aha moments is that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I always pictured myself pretty shy, was shy, and had to really force myself to talk to people. But one of my favorite parts of my job is meeting new people, talking to new people, finding out what they're about. I liked kind of coming out of my shell, and then I learned a lot about resilience because it's a very rejection heavy business. And I got comfortable with rejection and with fear. And once that happened, that's when my world really unfolded and I started trying all kinds of different things.
And so, talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that that probably scares a lot of people, right? People are afraid of being rejected, and so they don't do things. And I think you're kind of a person who hears no as maybe or not now. And so, can you talk a little bit more about how you built that resilience and how you toughened your skin against the rejection to build a successful career?
You're right that when I hear no, I hear either not yet or next. I really do. But what makes people uncomfortable when they say, I want to be able to have a thicker skin, I want to be able to do this, the only way to do it is to go out and fail and to go out and get rejected time and time again, and it just will sting a little bit less and less. I always say to people when I'm encouraging them to go do the thing, go apply for the job, go take the test, whatever it is. And I say, go fail. Because if that's what you're afraid of being rejected, then just go get rejected. So then we can get to the good work of what do you need to do to go where you want to go? And people kind of stop at that. Well, I'm afraid like they're going to reject me. Right. They absolutely are going to reject you. And you know what? You're going to survive. And then once you survive, you build that muscle time and time again. Believe it or not, you can make friends with fear and recalibrate your relationship with rejection. They didn't hire you anyway, right? So if they reject you, no big deal. You weren't working for them anyway.
Yeah, it was going to be a no anyway.
Yeah.
I love that. My podcast for next week is on the difference between confidence and self-esteem and how to build both.
Interesting.
And I think this is such an important conversation because I think people think that when you get rejected, that it's going to actually continue to deflate your self-esteem. And of course, it can if you let it.
Right.
But how you build your self-esteem is saying, okay, just because I got told no does not mean that I am worthless or that I don't have the talent to be able to do this. It's just simply a no. And if you can change your mindset with that, you can really build your self-esteem so that you can bounce back in the face of adversity, and maybe not just even bounce back, but bounce forward. And how do you look at building self-esteem through that lens?
I love that. What I've found is that it was just thin-skinned and it did hurt. And I had that I let it for a minute. And then I decided to make a game of it, really. And so I always tell people, do the thing, the biggest, try to go after the biggest thing first, because you're most likely guaranteed the no there. So you can desensitize. But I can think of one time I was trying to get in with a certain network and I was told no when I was rejected. And I was like, that's fine. Happens all the time. But then every time I saw that person who hired, as I was still working for ESPN and other networks, and I would see him and I'd wave across the way in the press conference and I'd be like, hey, Emory Anderson, we met. Is today the day you're going to hire me? And he was like, no. And then I'd see him again every few months. We'd be at the same event. Hey, today the day? And he thought I was a crazy person. And then I just started making a joke of it where I was like, hey, it's today the day. Finally, one day, no lie, Kerry, 18 months later, he came up to me and he said, today's the day. I didn't think that guy would ever hire me, but I just kept going because I thought he can't fire me, right? He didn't hire me. And then eventually he did. And I was shocked, but it was just an exercise for me because I thought this will thicken my skin, get rejected by the guy 6, 7, 8 times. Let's just try it out.
And do you think that he would have hired you if you wouldn't have made a game out of it? No way, right? He wouldn't have even probably remembered, right?
Right. He wouldn't have known who I was or remembered or, yeah. And it wasn't actually the goal to get hired by him. After he said no, I thought, well, I'll never get hired by him. So the goal for me was to desensitize myself to rejection, make a game of it. It actually wasn't, I'm going to ask him 20 times just to see if he'll hire me. That was kind of an unexpected outcome.
When you frame it that way, of making it into a game or a little bit of a joke and kept it casual, it didn't come across as you like asking for a job multiple times either, because that probably would have annoyed him, right? But instead it was kind of like, oh, I see what she's doing here. It made you stand out instead of either just going away and saying, all right, well, I'm never going to make that happen, or being that person who just never stops actually asking.
Right. But for your listeners, it is important to know that I already knew that this particular person was a bully. I had heard from many people that he was a bully. So would I do that same, ridiculous, it's today the day with somebody who was a really well-respected leader? No, I wouldn't have done it that way because I needed to show the bully that I was not intimidated by him. If it's somebody who's a really respected leader, I might go back every 6 months and say, I had this idea, or maybe I'm not even asking for a job. Maybe it is, I saw this and thought of you, because it's just a matter of staying kind of in the periphery so that they know who you are. Or sometimes move on. Next.
So this show is around leadership, and I know that you have been around some of the biggest coaches in successful franchises, and you've seen different styles of coaches. And one of the things that I know you talked about is shape-shifting leaders. Can you talk about what you've learned about leadership as you have grown in your career?
Yes, I've watched some incredible leaders. And what I learned is back 30 years ago, let's say 40 years ago, here's how we're going to do things. And everybody needs to do things my way as a leader. Well, that doesn't work. It's not a one size fits all anymore. The most successful leaders I have seen are shapeshifters, meaning they know how to weave individuality into a powerful group culture. It used to be you want to be well-rounded. And I say banish the thought of being well-rounded, play to your strengths. So if you're leading a team of people, you need to let them know, I see your strength. I also see what you're not so great at, and work in the strengths, because that's where people find value. Phil Jackson, Bulls coach, was one of the absolute best at this. Absolutely the best. And the example I always give is Dennis Rodman, who was the best rebounder in the NBA. Phil Jackson, of course, coached the Chicago Bulls. And in the middle of the season, one season, the final season, Rodman said, I need a vacation. And Michael Jordan's like, what? He needs a vacation. I mean, if anybody needs a vacation, I need a vacation. That's what Jordan is saying. But Phil Jackson let Rodman take his vacation. And he said, Rodman doesn't need basketball. It just isn't his whole identity, the way it is for Michael Jordan and other people. He said, we actually need Rodman because he's the best rebounder. So he's no good to us if he isn't fulfilled and happy. So we let him go on a bender to Vegas for 2 days, because what would normally kill the rest of us actually refreshed him and made him feel valued and part of a team. So Jackson was amazing with that. Other people, absolutely not. He'd feed them a different way, or give them data, or give them reading assignments. Each person, he shifted his leadership style to get the most out of them.
Yeah, I think that it's a brilliant example. And I agree completely. As I have been building my company here, it's because I've been able to understand what this person needs in this moment, and understanding personality styles and what motivates them and what demotivates them. And a lot of leaders think, oh, that's just too much work. But your job as a leader is to unleash the highest potential of every person on your team. And how can you do that if you don't get to know the people on your team and what they need, and then try to help give them that? A lot of people will say, well, maybe it's not fair, but that's not the point of this. The point is about performance and how do you get the best out of your team. And sometimes, yes, I'm going to have to do something different with another person than I would with this one, because they need something that's very different.
Yeah. And everybody's got different strengths.
Yep.
So, I mean, you remember those days where it was like, be well-rounded. It's gone now because we've learned how to weave everybody's strengths together to form a really strong fabric. That's what I see in great leadership.
I agree. And it's so interesting that we still have so much fear around our weaknesses. I'm interviewing people and I always want to ask that, like, what is your biggest weakness? Not because I care so much about what the weakness is. I mean, I want to make sure that I understand it for against the job duties, but really I want to see how comfortable are they, one, saying these are my weaknesses, and two, do they actually know? Like,
Right.
the answer I hate the most is like, oh, I'm a workaholic.
Right.
Like, that's such a lame weakness.
Exactly.
But I think that having that self-awareness around what your weaknesses are and being able to be comfortable with it. Like, there are things that I'm terrible at and I don't care. I'm going to make sure I have great people around me who are good at those things so that I can shine in the places that I'm good at. And if we could all just get comfortable knowing that we're not going to be good at everything, so why try?
Right. Sharpen your skill. What you have to offer to the world, sharpen that one.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your book. You wrote a book called Cultivating Audacity, which I see in your background. I love the peacock. I want to know where that comes from. So tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book.
I wrote the book because at this point in my career, I work with a lot of people that are emerging leaders, just starting, or I see a lot of people, even my age, who want to do a shift. And they don't know how to get from here to there. And what I see the most, Kerry, is that they're waiting. They're waiting for the right time. And I think we've been told, especially as women, like, you want to break through the glass ceiling. And that's not what I'm seeing out in the world. I am seeing a sticky floor. I'm seeing people stuck waiting for the right time. Do I have all the qualifications? Do I have enough time? Do I have enough money? I'll do it when things slow down. And that time never arrives. Waiting doesn't work. And so I wanted to give people some guidance as to how to identify what's standing between you, because we all have barriers. Fear, time, money, or your inner critic are the four that I see over and over again. And so I wanted to give people some tools from my own experience and those of my colleagues about how to work with them. And notice I'm not saying conquer them or banish fear. You can't conquer fear. It's a normal part of life. So how to work with it, because it's going to be on the ride with you, Kerry. You're just not going to let it drive. So it's going to be there. Don't stop pushing it away and start embracing it and see what it's trying to tell you. And I found that that's what worked for me. And I wanted to share it with people and help them skip the steps of 10 years of waiting. This is the right time. Go now.
Yeah, I agree. And so, how does someone cultivate audacity? Do you have to be an extrovert to go out there and take these risks and put yourself out there? Like, tell us a little bit about the steps you take.
Yeah, absolutely not, because I was super shy. Audacity is the willingness to take bold risks. Cultivating, obviously growing it, because I don't believe anybody is born with it. And part of that is identifying between risks that are worth it and risks that are reckless. And I walk people through that a lot in the book, ways that they can self-evaluate. The biggest thing, though, for me is audacity is 3 components. There's the mindset, the audacious mindset, which is really just rooted in optimism. Just the belief that things will work out. Not the way you want necessarily, but that you'll survive, whatever it is. It's optimism. You'll be okay. Now, the second part is audacious behavior and action, because you can sit on your mother's couch all day being optimistic and not a damn thing's going to happen. So you need to match that with behavior, and the behavior can be so small. It can start with saying no and stopping there and not giving the explanation that so many of us do. No, I can't because blah, 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 blah. Nope. No, I'm not available for that.
No, it's a complete sentence.
Right? Just practice that. No, I'm not available to do that. But taking little micro moments, behavior, maybe the setting at time. I talk about something called the urgency fallacy, creating time or viewing money a different way, but it has to be the action. When you have the audacious mindset and the action, and you're consistently doing those 2 things in unison, that's when you go from, what is Kerry doing, to, that's Kerry. She swings for the fences. That's when it becomes an audacious identity. And once you're free to keep living audaciously, seeing that you survived every different circumstance, I believe that's when your life starts to roll.
I have found that to be so true in my life. I was in a really bad spot in my 20s and just making horrible decisions in my life. And after hitting rock bottom, I was like, that is it. I have to choose to live or I have to choose to die. That's this path that I'm on. And my mindset is called the ownership mindset. That's my book, but there's so much of what you're talking about in it. It is deciding, okay, I might as well bet on myself.
Yeah.
What else is there? Bet on myself.
Right.
And even though I was lost and even though I was in debt and I was struggling with substance abuse issues, I decided I was going to bet on myself. And then it's amazing what happens when you just make that decision. Things start to fall into place. Like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this.
Yes.
But you have to decide that you're going to live your life differently. If
Yes.
you're not happy, you have to decide. No one's ever going to make that decision for you. And it's not going to suddenly change by waiting 4 or 5 years or a decade.
Right. And when we see failure, right, people are, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. To me, there's no failure anymore at all. It's all just data points. Okay, I tried this. This didn't work. What did I learn from it? How can I take something away? How can I kind of be redirected to try something else? There's no failure. It's all just information to process.
I agree with you. I actually like it when I fail. I know that sounds weird,
I love
but
it.
I do. It's like I really learned something from this. And I just, at this point in my career, I've been, running this company for 18 years, and I've had so many things that didn't go the way that I expected them to. And almost every single one of them, something good has come out of it, even if it was painful in the moment. And so now I just look at it as like, oh, it's great. It's going to be another opportunity to grow and to learn and to get better. And it's amazing what you can do when you shift that mindset.
You
Yeah,
don't learn from the
exactly.
successes. You learn from the failures, or I'm kind of
Yes.
air quote, perceived failures.
Nobody ever says, oh, that went so smooth. I learned so much from that.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I get, because I talk a lot about living out your purpose and understanding your purpose, but I do think a lot of people don't understand that about themselves. They don't really know what they want. They know what they don't want, right? I don't want this anymore, but I don't know what I want. And that clarity is really important.
Mhm.
So do you talk about that in your book? Like what happens if you're not really sure if you know what you want?
Absolutely. Because some of us build backwards. Some of us know what we don't want. When I got out of college, I thought, Well, I don't want to work in an office all day, but I also don't want to work outside. Math it taxes my head, science beyond my brain. I faint at the sight of blood. Like I just went through and said, okay, I don't want to do any of these things because we build backwards. Now, I put a couple of tools in the book, Cultivating Audacity, to kind of help you figure it out. And one of them, there's an image that people can just write on or work with where it's a funnel, where you're talking about all the things that you love to do. And then you're narrowing it down to which ones are you good at. And this draws upon the ikigai example that a lot of people use, which is a Japanese term meaning reason for being. For example, I love to garden, but I kill everything except the kids. So nobody's ever going to hire me to garden. So it doesn't get to that next tier. Then it becomes, what does the world need? In that case, world needs good gardeners. And what can you be paid to do? Well, you can be paid to garden if that's your gift and you enjoy it and you're good at it and the world needs it. And those filter down. Now, traditionally, people like to think, well, what's the one thing? I don't think there has to be one thing in terms of what you want to do. Several things can be true at once. You can want to work from home and build a big business. You can do a couple of things. For me, it was, I want to travel internationally. I want to spend time with the kids and I want to help people do whatever it is that their goal is. And I love sports. So I'm a sports broadcaster, a keynote speaker and author. And my summer assignments for television, I'm overseas, like Poland, Saudi Arabia, Netherlands, Brazil, covering sports, and they let me bring my kids. So all the things that I filtered down and created, I don't think that would have happened, Kerry, if I hadn't put it out there and said, these are the things that I want to do simultaneously. And my kids look forward to it every summer. They're like, where are we going? I'm like, well, I was thinking we might go to Amsterdam. It's a fun exercise because something will shake out for you.
Yeah. You have to start to narrow it down because if you don't say, these are the things that I want from my life, from my career, then it's really hard to go and create that. And let's face it, we are creating our lives with the way that we think and the way that we feel about things. And so start to narrow it down and put it out there, even if it feels audacious,
right?
Like, oh, that's never going to happen. I don't care. Write it down. And then you can start making decisions, looking for those opportunities that help align for that. But if you don't know where you're going, then as Alice in Wonderland's Cheshire Cat says, then any path will get you there. So don't be afraid to write down what you want. And the other thing that I always tell people too is that if it changes, that's okay.
I hope it changes.
The things that I wanted 18 years ago when I moved back to Durango and I started running this company are very different than the things that I want now at 46. And that's okay. It's always going to evolve, but it's all built upon the things that I said that I wanted back then. And when it doesn't serve you anymore, just be like, that's not important to me anymore.
Right.
I've grown, I've evolved. I did that. It didn't bring me happiness and joy like I thought it was. Great. Piece of information, move on to the next thing. But I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I have to get it right.
No, the last chapter in the book is called the reevaluation loop. Because I have changed my job so many times. I was a producer, and then I wanted to be LA bureau producer. Then I wanted to be a sideline reporter. Then I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. It just changed a long way. Then I wanted to be an author, and then I wanted to be a public speaker. And so in the reevaluation loop, I have an assessment that you can take to kind of figure out what parts are working for you in your life and what aren't. There's career and professional. There's your health and wellness, and there's your relationships. After I wrote the assessment, I took my own assessment. And career is going really well. And health and wellness, really well. And my relationships, terrible. Terrible. Because I put all my effort and work into building, and I wasn't nurturing my friendships enough. So by reevaluating that, I started carving out some time for friends and saying, hey, let's go to lunch. Do you want to go walk the dogs? Because I could see it and I needed to adjust it, ease back a little bit on one thing to make space for another.
Yeah, that's great. And again, it's all going to evolve, especially where we are in our careers. Like something's going to give, but it doesn't mean that it's hopeless, right? You can make different decisions if you say, okay, now this is what's important to me and I'm going to put effort into this. So I agree with you. I'm in the cultivating friendships part of my life again. In my 20s, I put so much time. And then, it was like, okay, I got to figure out how to be a CEO. And now it's like, no, I actually have time to cultivate deeper friendships and more friendships than I've had in the last several years. and it feels really good. And I'm not beating myself up for it. This is where I want to be in my life now. What am I going to do about it so that I have those needs met?
Yes, and there's an important concept in the book called the front row, your front row, which is a group of people carefully curated by you who are going to push you and pick you up and console you and bounce ideas off of what you want to do. And I always say your front row is probably not your mom, and it's probably not your best friend because they want you to stay safe. They're afraid that you might get hurt or they're putting their own projections. Your front row are people, they don't have to be in the same area or the same business that you're in at all. They have to be people that will tell you the truth, and they have to be able to be trying to do big things themselves so that you can keep pushing each other. That's a big part of cultivating new friendships and strengthening friendships. We're missing a lot of social connection. You can make friends with Chat GPT and ask them anything you want. Your dinner can be delivered. And this is a way to socially connect with people outside of our hangout with our friends, your front
Yeah, our
row.
little bubble. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I do want to talk a little bit about risk
Mhm.
because I think that's a big part of all of this. And I know you talk about in your book how to separate the worth it risks versus the reckless risks. So, can you talk a little bit about what the difference is? I think a lot of people think that a worth it risk feels reckless until they can go through a little bit of an analysis process. So, can you talk about how to go through that process?
Sure. And a risk that is reckless at one point in your life may be worth it at another point in your life. And I'll give you an example. When I was 26, I had for me, the best job in the world, working at ESPN's headquarters. But I absolutely hated living in Connecticut. I hated shoveling snow. And when I went out to LA, I went back to the boss's office afterwards and said, I want to be LA bureau producer. And he said, well, we already have an LA bureau producer. And I said, I know. That's what makes this so awkward, just a joke with him. And after we talked about it for a while, he said to me, listen, wait 2 more years. If we haven't made you LA bureau producer in 2 years, what will you have really lost? And I thought, 2 years in my 20s. That's what I would have lost. And so I gave him my notice. I think he asked for 3 weeks. He called me impatient. I agreed, but I wanted to think about my life, how I want to spend my days and nights, not just my job. And so I quit and drove cross country. I was 26 years old. I did not have a mortgage. I did not have debt. I did not have college loans. And so that was a worth it risk because I knew I would be able to grind. Within that year, ESPN hired me back at double the salary. So it ended up being amazing. At this stage of my life, if I were to quit my job and move cross country, that would be reckless. I got 3 kids. I've got much bigger bills. So starting to evaluate what's the potential cost if things don't go the way that you want to. And there's all kinds of checklists in there. Here's the easiest way to put it. Risks that are worth it move you closer to your values and visions and goal and who you want to be. Anything that doesn't move you towards that is reckless. Worth it risks benefit you. It's not about trying to impress somebody else or won't they see me then? I'll show them. Anything external motivation is going to lead you towards reckless risk. So worth it risks are for you, by you, moving you toward the life that you want to have.
I love that. What a great way to put that. So thank you for framing it like that. I'm definitely a risk taker in my life too, but I think that I've always been able to do that analysis to say, yeah, this is what's going to move me forward, even though my mom is like, what are you doing?
Yes. That's why I say, sorry, mom. They want you to stay safe.
Yeah.
And sometimes, sadly, you'll find friends who want you to stay small. And they can still be your friend, but they don't get a seat in the front row. They don't get to help you make decisions because they might put their own fears on you or be fearful that your relationship is going to change with your success.
Great advice. All right. So, a couple more questions to wrap things up here. What is the one thing that you want readers to take away from Cultivating Audacity? This is what I want you to be able to go and do with your life. What is that?
I want you to create a life that you're excited to wake up to every day. I think a lot of people say, I hope to do this and I hope to do that. And I've got a really unpopular take on hope. It's not a plan. It's a lovely word. It's a virtue. I understand that. Hope doesn't really get you anywhere. Feels good. So I think it is about creating a plan when you can envision your days and nights, not just your job, but creating an entire life that you're excited to wake up to. That's what I want for people. And I promise you, this book can help people get there. It really can, because we talk about the whole person and what you can do to overcome your particular barriers and use your strengths.
So I have to tell you the story. I use this journaling website. It's called Dabble Me. It sends you an email every day to get you to journal. And at the bottom, it says, on this day in 2023, you wrote this. And I was reading through those and I realized how often I use the word I hope, I hope, I hope.
Mhm.
And because it sends me the email, I got to see that this was this pattern.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, hope is not building something intentionally.
Right.
And so I said, I'm going to stop saying I hope. I'm going to say I am.
I am.
I am
Yes.
when this happens. And it has been remarkable
Mhm.
how much it has changed the way that I think about the things that I want to go do,
Yes.
the relationships that I want to have, or how I handle a certain situation. I have gotten the word hope out of my vocabulary. You're right. It's not a plan, it's not
Excellent.
action. Right? It's just like hoping that something is going to happen and it doesn't inspire that action. So I'm really glad you said that because it was probably about, oh gosh, maybe 8 or 9 months ago when I realized how much I used that word and how much it was holding me back.
I love it. I do a lot of seminars for teams in college where a coach will bring me in to talk to teams. And I say, okay, 5 years from now, let's talk about your life and use the words I am, whatever it is. For a lot of, I am a professional basketball player, if that's their goal. And I have them describe for 1 minute, they cannot stop talking. They just keep talking about their life with I am. I am whatever it was they wanted to be. I am married with 2 children. I am the owner of my own business. I am a best-selling author and building it and the power of it, just watching the way that their body language changes because I have to correct them all the time. I walk around and they're like, I want to. And I was like, I am. I am running my own business, that kind of thing. It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's how you manifest your life.
Mhm.
Right? And then you feel it. What does it feel like to run your own business? What does it feel like to
Yes.
be on the basketball team, to be that star, to be whatever? I think that's the other piece that people really miss. You can't just visualize it or even say I am, but what does it feel like when you've achieved that goal? That's the trick of creating the life that you want.
Yep.
Okay, last question before I ask you where people can learn more about you. So, the name of this podcast is called Reflect Forward. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
Reflect forward means to me kind of a little bit of what we're talking about is thinking about how my life is going to look going forward. Do I get it? No, you have to envision it in order to create it. So reflecting forward means exactly that. And it's always positive when I reflect forward. It's always great things ahead because your mind believes what you tell it.
That's so true. That's so true. Wonderful. I love that. Okay, how can people find you and where can they buy your book?
My website, AnnMarieAnderson.com, is the easiest place to find me. And you can reach me there if you want me to speak to your group. You can also be linked to buy Cultivating Audacity. It's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, wherever you buy your books, you can find it there. And I'm always really interested to hear what people learn from it. You can reach me on Instagram at AnnMarieAndersonTV.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and having this fabulous conversation with me. You dropped so many great nuggets, and I really hope everybody goes out and buys your book and goes and cultivates audacity. What better way to live?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kerry. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. All right, hang tight, everybody. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into that interview with Anne-Marie. My call to action for you today is how are you going to cultivate audacity in your life? What change do you want to make? What's one big, bold move that you want in your life and career? And what's one thing you're going to do to take action on making that happen? As Anne-Marie said, it can sometimes just be small. It can just be a small action that helps you move in the right direction to creating that life you want. So that's what I'd like for you to take away today. Just think about that for a few minutes as this podcast ends. All right. If you like this episode and you know somebody who wants to make a big, bold move in their life or who is feeling a little bit stuck, please share this episode with them. I know that they're going to learn a lot from it. Or go buy Anne Marie's book. It is chock full of actionable takeaways and tips on how to build the life that you want. And if you like this overall podcast, Reflect Forward with Kerry Siggins, please write a review, subscribe to it on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, share it with a friend. It always helps with the algorithms and gets these amazing interviews out there to the world. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.